morning, good afternoon and good evening. You are watching the Paris Fintech Forum Communities video interview series. I'm Elliott Gotkine and today I'm joined by the CEO and Chairman of Sunrise Banks. David Reiling, great to have you with us.
Elliott, great to see you again. I love being here.
Great. Okay, well look, before we get cracking, we're going to learn a little bit more about Sunrise Banks and what it's been up to over the past 12 months. So, David, we spoke about a year ago. Perhaps for those that missed it, just remind us very, very briefly what it is that Sunrise does, and then perhaps tell us what you have been up to over the past 12 months.
Well, great, Elliott. Well, Sunrise Banks is a nationally chartered bank in the U.S. We are in the vibrant city of Minneapolis, Minnesota. And we also have an office in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, which maybe for the European viewers in this, is actually a fintech and payments hub. Actually, most of the major banks have bank charters there due to the laws of South Dakota, and we have an office there as well. Sunrise is a mission-driven bank, so we're a B Corp. So think people, planet, profit in regards to the bank's mission, and we accomplish that mission really in two ways. One being a place-based bank. So when you think of a bank that has some branches, we have those as well. We're expanding both in the Twin Cities of Minneapolis and St. Paul as well as Sioux Falls. And then we have our national products, which is really where our fintech and our payments partnerships live. And so maybe to give some context around that, at Sunrise, we just purchased actually a small dollar loan fintech that we're bringing into the bank, which really complements some of our capabilities around serving low and moderate income people, particularly with small dollar loans. We have a general, I should say we have kind of a specific niche in small dollar lending as we partner with fintechs like Self, which does credit builder loans. So for example, last year we did a little over, I think, 260,000 loans for a total of about 200 million in terms of loan originations with Self. We partner with the likes of Opportune and Upgrade in terms of purchasing loans. And maybe one thing that the audience may not know is we're probably about the 5th or 6th largest prepaid card issuer in the U.S. And so we do have the capabilities to do payments as well as fintech partnerships and integration. And we just keep improving those operations and outreach every year.
You mentioned an acquisition. You also raised some money, I think, over the last 12 months. Does that mean you've got a nice war chest, perhaps, to go out and do some more, maybe bigger acquisitions?
Well, that is, say, in the planning stages. We have been working on this particular acquisition for some time, but we raised $250 million last year. And that has really given us the capital and the fuel in which to grow and to do future acquisitions, as well as look at strategic partnerships that are quite large. And so from that standpoint, the bank is really well positioned. I would say we're also really well positioned from a standpoint of, due to our payments business, we have significant liquidity. And so banks in the U.S. are a little bit tight on their deposits where we have really sufficient liquidity. And as a result, we're looking at more lending programs than ever before. So it's been a lot of fun.
Okay, and you talked about being, mission driven, and I know you work with mission-aligned fintechs and work towards financial inclusion, and I guess that's part of the rationale behind the acquisition you mentioned. What else has been going on that front?
Yeah, a lot on that front. So as the audience might remember, Minneapolis was really the epicenter of George Floyd, and that where George Floyd was murdered is really our backyard of our business in terms of being local. And so equity is quite a big deal for us. And so we are looking at equity in all sorts of avenues, pretty much every avenue in terms of the bank, whether it's on the local front or on the national products front, as to how do we make financial services more accessible, easy to understand, really developing, I think, the components of where we see opportunity. And that can be in fintech that's what we'll call smart, using AI, and incorporating in not only existing data sets, but alternative ones in which to make, I'll say, financial services more accessible to all.
Okay, so we've heard about what's new with Sunrise Banks. Let's now find out what's new with David. So, David, as well as running Sunrise Banks, you're also chairman of the Global Alliance for Banking on Values. Tell us more about GAVI and why it's so important to you.
Yeah, the GAVI, in my opinion, is just a great microcosm of where I think banking is going and where it needs to go from a standpoint of again, looking at the aspects of finance from a place of in service of people in the planet. So how do you really make financial services accessible to all people as well as climate friendly? And so those two, when you put them together, really defines the Global Alliance for Banking on Values. So it's an alliance of 72 banks today in 42 countries. And so it really represents a global perspective in terms of not only the social impact that these banks are making, but the environmental impact and how they're financing that. And so the exchange of ideas and cultures and where these different banks kind of grew up out of in terms of whether it's microfinance or on the social side or in the environmental side really makes for great conversation and innovation talk. And so the GAVI, close to my heart, I chair that organization, enjoy every meeting of it and all the unique banks that are in it. It's really a fascinating alliance.
And also earlier this year, I think you were recognized as one of the world's top 100 impact CEOs, so congratulations on that. Does this kind of recognition mean more to you than, I don't know, making Sunrise bigger and more profitable and better known?
You know, while the awards are nice and the accolades are nice, the thing that I find maybe most rewarding about these types of programs is that you get to expand and meet more people in the space. This is my tribe, if you will. So the impact CEOs are really the ones that are leading companies in terms of that triple bottom line and making the world a better place, whether it's socially or environmentally. And it's in that space where there's just innovation, there's abundant thinking in terms of how business models can be changed. There's kind of somewhat of a disregard of whether you're a for-profit, a nonprofit, or a combination of both. It's really about how do you serve others in the planet and make a profit at the same time, of which a lot of people have a hard time grasping of like, no, profit is amongst everything. The fact is you can do all three. It's really a choice of where you choose from a values position. And I just find this to be a really innovative and exciting group of people to hang out with and learn more and get more innovative ideas.
And you mentioned that you're headquartered in the same city as the murder of George Floyd. I mean, in the US, especially right now, there are so many pitfalls out there for CEOs in terms of politics and the culture wars. A couple of corporations, Disney, Budweiser, for example, spring to mind as a couple of companies that have perhaps found themselves experiencing challenges perhaps they weren't expecting. How do you ensure that you and Sunrise continue to do what's right, but without alienating potential customers and investors who may disagree with some of your stances on certain issues?
Yeah, I think Sunrise, from a standpoint of, we are very much a values-driven organization, and our values are really clear in terms of what the bank stands for. And we hire and fire based on those values. And so as a result of that, we may not be for everybody. So there'll be people who choose not to bank with us because of those values or who we serve. That's just fine. We steadfast on those values, and there's plenty of market for us to serve. And quite frankly, it is our differentiating point in the marketplace. We are not like every other bank. We are going to pick and choose where we do business based on what we think is appropriate from a values lens. And it's with that lens that we've been very successful. But we are not all things to all people. And so I have to tell you just a little story, because I had, early on in my career, I had a run-in with Jerry from Ben & Jerry's, the ice cream shop. And it was late at night, and we might have had a few cocktails at that point in time, but I told him the story of the bank, and he gave me quite an inspirational speech in terms of what Ben & Jerry's stood for at that time, meaning organic, local farming, etc. And so he really gave me the courage to say, you know what, you're not, stay for what you believe in. That is where you're going to have a successful business. When you try to bend and be all things to all people, you will never get there. But he was really steadfast on that, and that conversation really stuck with me. And that's the way Sunrise has been for the past 30 years, is this is who we are, this is what we do. You may like it, you may not.
As well as a few drinks, I hope you shared some Chunky Monkey or something as well, as that would have been my preference.
We did not, but he was playing in the band.
Okay, so look, David, a key part of this interview is to get your take on the future of finance. But first, we're going to take a very quick break, after which we're going to continue our conversation with Sunrise Bank's CEO and Chairman, David Reiling. Welcome back, and don't forget, if you're not already a full member of our community, everything you need to join can be found at www.parisfintechforum.com. And now, David, let's talk about the future of finance. So, David, look, for better or worse, artificial intelligence is now part of our everyday lives. You can't avoid it, no matter how much you may want to. How can banks and fintechs ensure that it's used for good?
Well, AI is fantastic, and in my opinion, I think it can be used for good, tremendous amounts of good. But there is kind of we're at this moment of whether, it's all promise or it's a problem. And at this particular point, I think the promise of it is really a place where we need to focus, and it is changing very quickly. The fact is that in financial services, particularly in the United States, there has been biases built into the system, and there are people in companies, small businesses that are left out of the financial system, really to the detriment of the economy. And so this is such a great place using and leveraging AI in which to overcome the past in terms of the system biases and building a more equitable future for all. And again, it's not only using maybe a traditional data set, but bringing in new data sets. Again, opening up this field of finance and banking in which it's a bit more inclusive, risk is really identified, pricing becomes appropriate and more specific, and there's a way to really bring more people in and drive the economy. And so it's in that space that I think there's one really big opportunity to really change the past and the systems that we currently live in. There's one other area that I think is fantastic as well. I'm a futurist, visionary type of thinker, and it's in that space that is really where I think AI can be predictive for the everyday person. There's predictive analytics for stock trading by bringing all sorts of data to the forefront as to obviously what's the right next stock to pick. Is there a way that AI can be used for someone to say, hey, these are the patterns that we see, avoid this calamity that is likely to happen by doing these particular moves, and keeping someone out of a very distressful situation, preserving their wealth, eliminating the stress that goes with that. But also the flip side of that is monitoring someone's financial behavior and attitudes towards things and saying, hey, it is a great opportunity potentially to try to buy a home. This is the way that might happen. You might go see these people, and these are the factors that come into play. And so I see it both from a standpoint of preventing calamity as well as presenting opportunities for people and guiding people on a financial journey that's customized to them. And I think that type of financial education or counseling it can be super effective, particularly on a low and moderate income side of the scale, who generally have a bit less access to that type of advice.
Right, I was going to say, because I guess it's not just about action, it's also about communication, so that the public is well informed about the opportunities and the potential pitfalls for their financial lives.
You could see a future where someone, a young person or a couple, they're making their way through, they're getting positioned to buy a home. AI could say, you're in a place now where your rent is equivalent to a mortgage payment. This is the type of house that you may be able to buy based on its cost and location. As a matter of fact, I went out and looked. Here are 4 homes available. Here are the real estate agents. I mean, this technology is out there to really bring a path and make it easy for people to begin to think in advance onto some things that they thought may not be possible. And so I think there's really an opportunity to bring home success there.
And of course, as more of our financial lives are digitized, the need for bank branches will inevitably diminish. How can the industry strike a balance between, I suppose, efficiency and also serving all of its customers, including those who may struggle to, use smartphones and may rely on branches?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think even beyond the bank branch itself, it's important to note that banking is human. It's built for human. Financial services are built for humans. And so how do you really take into account, if you were to maybe crack that open a little bit, humans are emotional. Money's emotional. And it's in that space of contending with the emotion around money and financial services that there's, I think, a really big opportunity. But the fact is that when you think of money being emotional, there's a spectrum. So easy enough, hey, you pay your utility bill every month. That may be a very low emotional type of transaction. As a matter of fact, you may not even know it happens because it might be set up automatically to come out of your account, right? But you might say paying all your bills at the end of the month has a bit more emotional to it. It feels pretty good. To the contrary, you can almost feel it when I say if you can't pay all your bills at the end of the month, you kind of feel that pit in the bottom of your stomach, that angst. And so how do you contend and help somebody through that emotion of not being able to meet all their obligations and then bringing them forward out of that? And usually the larger the financial transaction, the more emotion that is around it. So every financial transaction has kind of an emotional ROI to it, whether it's small and micro or whether it's large. I think fintech can help in the ease of these transactions, but I think addressing the emotion part is the really critical component. Technology and AI can give you the transactional part, but it can't show empathy. It can read sentiment in some cases in terms of AI, but again, it's humans that provide empathy with another person in terms of where they are emotionally. There, I think, lies a secret sauce, and particularly for fintech, because a lot of fintechs that I see are trying to build their business. They're looking for customers, and it's all about customer acquisition. It's not about long-term value or monetizing this business. Eventually, that has to come into play, and that's where I think the emotional aspect, if dealt with or addressed, takes into account a longer lifetime value of a client and hence a better valuation for a fintech. And so I think there's a real secret sauce there. I wish I had some great remedies or solutions to that beyond just a bank branch, but I think there are many ways in which to do that. And it can be digital. It's just there's going to need to be a human interaction at some point in order to bring that value to bear.
Okay, now David, since we spoke about a year ago, we've seen Silicon Valley Bank and others collapse due in part to the knock-on effects of rising interest rates. Should banks be forced to do more in terms of stressing their balance sheets for all scenarios, even unprecedented ones?
So the answer is yes. There should be scenarios being run constantly, taking into account current conditions, most probable conditions, and then least probable conditions. And that happens today. Sunrise does that every month when we do our asset liability management. And so it's in those places where what do you do with that analysis now? And that's really, I think, where the leadership of an organization, particularly a bank, comes into play with that analysis. How do you deal with the outliers, and what are the things and the triggers as you begin to see those unfold? How do you move very quickly in today's digital world, right? Silicon Valley Bank, 48 hours, really unprecedented in terms of its decline. But the factors leading up to it obviously were years in the making. And there are management decisions that took into account in its collapse. And so as a result of that, those are factors that I think need to be addressed. So running a prudent bank a lot of times isn't very sexy. You need to make things that need investment for things that are a bit on the outlier or on the tails of the probability scale.
Okay, so look, David, it's time now for our round of rapid fire questions. Are you ready?
I am ready.
Great. So look, I've got 90 seconds on the clock. Once my alarm sounds off, we will stop, but we'll try and get through as many as possible. So here we go. What fintech segment, besides yours, has the biggest potential over the next 5 years?
I think small dollar lending has a huge potential.
What is the biggest pain point in your everyday financial life that you'd like to see resolved?
Moving from manual to digital.
Are we at the beginning, middle, or end of the fintech wave?
Middle.
Perhaps less fashionable than last year, but do you have a metaverse strategy?
We do not have a metaverse strategy.
Do you think regulations in the EU and US have kept pace with all the possibilities in the financial industry?
Not even close.
How would you describe non-fungible tokens, NFTs, again, slightly less fashionable than last year? A scam, B, an interesting concept, or C, part of the future that we really don't want to miss out on?
You know, I would go with D, and I would bet on Taylor Swift tickets more than I would FTN, or fungible tokens.
Have you personally ever invested in crypto?
No.
Are physical points of sales part of the future of finance?
Yes.
On a scale of 1 to 10, 10 the most likely, 1 the least likely, how likely do you rate the following of happening in the next 10 years? That one of the neobanks will be as profitable as a top-tier legacy bank?
1.
That you'll be able to open a crypto account at a top-tier bank?
7.
Okay. Well, on that note, we are actually out of time for our round of rapid-fire questions and for our conversation. So I really just want to thank you, David Reiling, Chairman and CEO of Sunrise Banks, for taking the time to speak with me today. Thank you.
Thank you, Elliott. Great to be with you.
And for everyone watching, we will be back again next time with another big name from the world of finance and technology. We do hope you'll be able to join us again then. In the meantime, don't forget to subscribe to the Paris Fintech Forum YouTube channel, or to follow us on Twitter, at Paris Fin Forum. That's all for now. See you next time. Bye-bye.